During a long-awaited dinner with my son and his wife, our first attempt at reconciliation after years of silence, I felt my phone vibrate under the table. The message on the screen froze my breath. "Stand up. Leave now. Don't tell your son." My hand trembled as I slipped the phone back into my pocket. I didn't argue. I didn't even ask why. I simply obeyed. And that choice saved my life because half an hour later, red and blue lights painted their mansion walls, and the police were at the door. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. The night had started so simply. Soap bubbles clung to my worn hands as I scrubbed the old coffee cup, the same one I wash every evening. One plate, one fork, one glass. The quiet ritual of a widower who'd grown used to silence. The kitchen in my Queens row house felt smaller each year, the walls closing in with memories of Dorothy. Her voice used to fill this space warm and steady, turning ordinary evenings into something that felt like home. I dried the cup carefully and placed it in its usual spot on the rack. Maybe keeping order was all I had left. On the fridge, a fading photograph hung under a cracked magnet. My son Marcus at his college graduation, beaming in cap and gown, his arm around Dorothy. I stood just off to the side, trying not to cry as I snapped the picture. That photo lived on the fridge not because it was perfect, but because it was the last time I remembered us being a real family. Before the arguments, before the requests for money, before the silence that settled in like rot. The shrill ring of the landline sliced through my thoughts. I nearly dropped the dish towel. Caller ID glowed against my reading glasses. The name hit me like a fist. Marcus, my son. For a long moment I just stared at the screen. 1 year of silence stretched between us like an ocean I had no way of crossing. The last time we'd spoken, he'd stormed out after I refused to hand him $50,000 for a startup that already sounded doomed. I had built my chain of pawn shops, one deal and one customer at a time, working Brooklyn and Harlem streets where trust was currency. I wasn't about to fund a dream built on borrowed air. That was the night he called me a bitter old man who didn't believe in him. That was the night we stopped being father and son. But now his name was on my phone. I lifted the receiver slowly. My throat tightened. "Hello." My voice cracked more than I wanted it to. "Dad." His tone carried that same hesitation he had when he was a boy and broke something valuable. Not anger, but fear of being judged. "It's me." My chest constricted. For a second I couldn't speak. "Marcus, I wasn't expecting this. I know he cut me off. I know it's been too long, way too long." I could hear him breathing hard as though the call itself took courage. "But I don't want to waste any more time. Amanda and I miss you. We miss family." The word family hung in the air like smoke. I hadn't heard it from him in years. "I miss it too," I admitted, surprising myself with the honesty. "Dad, would you come for dinner tonight? Amanda's making that pot roast you love. We want to talk. Talk like before." I glanced at the small framed photo on my mantel. Marcus in his black tux on his wedding day. Amanda beside him in white silk blonde hair, perfect smile practiced. Dorothy radiant beside me, whispering, "He'll be fine, James. Families always find their way back." I wanted to believe her now. Tonight. My voice gave away my shock. "Tonight," he said firmly. "We've wasted enough time." His voice softened. "Thank you for giving us another chance." After I hung up, I sat staring at the photo. Dorothy's smile met mine from behind the glass frame. It almost felt like her voice was whispering again. "It's time, James. It's time to come home." I rose from my chair with a purpose I hadn't felt in years. Upstairs, my bedroom looked like a museum no one visited. Dorothy's scarves still draped the dresser. Her perfume bottles, untouched but still faintly fragrant, lined the shelf. I opened my closet. My fingers brushed past work shirts until they found the navy suit still wrapped in plastic. Dorothy had bought it for me the day Marcus graduated college. "You need something nice for important occasions," she'd said, smoothing the lapels with those careful hands. In the bathroom, the mirror reflected a man I barely recognized. 77 years had carved deep lines into my brown skin. Silver hair had overtaken the black. My eyes, though tired, still carried a spark. I shaved carefully as though looking younger might bridge the years. Before leaving, I opened the drawer of my nightstand. Inside lay the pocket watch Dorothy gave me on our wedding day. "So you'll never lose time with me," she had said, her eyes bright with promise. I wound it once, hearing the tiny gears click to life, and slipped it into my vest pocket. Some part of me believed she would walk beside me tonight. I booked a car through the app. Westchester County, New York, 40 minutes away, another world from my row house in Queens. As the driver pulled up, I clutched a bottle of 20-year-old bourbon, my peace offering. The ride was quiet. Streetlights blurred past as the city gave way to open highway, then to manicured lawns and sprawling estates. Westchester County was a place where hedge clippers hummed every Saturday and fountains danced for nobody but their owners. When the car stopped before a mansion with stone columns and glowing windows, my stomach sank. This wasn't the life Marcus had when I last saw him. How had he managed this? The house looked like it belonged in a magazine. Every window blazed with warm light. The driveway was lined with expensive cars that gleamed under landscape lighting. I stepped out slowly. My shoes polished but not new clicked against stone pavers. The front door opened before I could knock. A woman stood there, mid-50s, with weary eyes and a crisp uniform. A housekeeper. "Mr. Robinson," she said warmly, but her smile flickered like a candle in the wind. "I'm Rosa. Please come in." Something in her eyes unsettled me. Gratitude. Fear. It vanished before I could name it. The foyer stretched wide with marble floors and a chandelier that could have paid off my mortgage. Oil paintings hung like silent judges. The air smelled of fresh lilies and money. "Dad." Marcus's voice echoed down the hall. He appeared looking like he had stepped out of a fashion spread. Expensive suit, perfect hair, a smile too eager, too polished. He hugged me tightly, a beat too long. "You look great." Before I could respond, Amanda emerged. Silk dress, flawless makeup, diamonds catching the light. She kissed my cheek, her perfume sharp and cold. "James, finally. We're so happy you're here." I managed to smile, but the sheer opulence pressed in on me. "This place, it's incredible. How did you manage all this?" "Real estate," David cut in quickly. His laugh rang hollow. "Caught the market at the right time. Lucky break." Amanda linked her arm through mine, guiding me forward. "Come, let's get you comfortable." I handed Marcus the bourbon. His face lit up as he studied the label. "Dad, this is fantastic. You shouldn't have." We walked into a dining room that belonged in a glossy magazine. Mahogany table china, gleaming silver, perfectly aligned. The chandelier above rained warm light over every detail. My chair was waiting at the head of the table. Amanda smiled warmly. "We want tonight to be special. To start over." I sat down, smoothing my suit as I glanced around. For the first time in years, I felt a fragile thread of hope weaving itself through me. Maybe Dorothy had been right. Maybe families did find their way back. But then my phone vibrated. A message from an unknown number. My blood chilled as I read it. "Stand up. Leave now. Don't tell your son." The words on the glowing screen burned into my eyes. "Stand up. Leave now. Don't tell your son." My breath caught my fingers trembling just enough to make the phone slip slightly against my palm. I stared at those words, my heart hammering against my ribs. Who would send this? How did they know I was here? How did they get my number? Marcus's laugh rang out at the edge of the table, too bright, too eager, as if he were trying to prove something not only to me, but to himself. Amanda reached for the wine bottle, pouring with flawless grace, her smile practiced like a dancer's final bow. Neither of them noticed the way my knuckles whitened around the napkin in my lap. Neither heard the pounding in my chest. I forced a nod, swallowing whatever expression threatened to betray me. My mind raced. This had to be a mistake, some wrong number, some prank, but the specificity of it chilled me. "Don't tell your son, not don't tell Marcus. Your son. Whoever sent this knew exactly who I was and where I was sitting." "Excuse me," I muttered, rising from the table with a hand against my stomach. Too much pot roast too fast. My voice came out steadier than I felt. Marcus chuckled politely, but his eyes were sharp, studying me the way gamblers study dice before a throw. "You sure you're okay, Dad? You look pale." "Fine," I lied, pushing my chair back carefully. "Just not used to rich meals anymore." Amanda's hand lingered on my forearm for just a moment longer than comfort allowed. Her fingers were cool, her nails perfectly manicured. "We'll have to get you used to them," she said sweetly. "We want you here often, James." The words should have felt like comfort, like family welcoming me back. Instead, they fell over me like chains. I nodded again and moved toward the hallway, my legs unsteady beneath me. In the hallway, the noise of silverware and low conversation faded into a muffled hum. I leaned against the cool wall, my breath unsteady. The chandelier above me buzzed faintly, each flicker of light like a warning. I pulled out my phone again, rereading the message. The number was blocked. No name, no caller ID, just those words staring back at me like a threat or a lifeline. I couldn't tell which. My thumb hovered over the reply button, but what would I even say? Who is this? Why? Instead, I slipped the phone back into my pocket and tried to steady my breathing. Dorothy's pocket watch pressed against my chest through the vest, its steady tick a reminder that time was still moving even when I felt frozen. I thought about walking out right then, just leaving. Calling a car and disappearing into the night without explanation. But that would raise questions I wasn't ready to answer. And some part of me, stubborn and perhaps foolish, wanted to believe this was all a misunderstanding, that Marcus had changed, that family could be salvaged. I straightened my tie and walked back toward the dining room. As I turned the corner, I nearly collided with Rosa. She was carrying a tray of empty glasses, her movements quick and efficient. When our eyes met, something passed between us. Her gaze held mine for just a second too long, and in that brief moment I saw it again. Fear. Not for herself, but for me. "Everything all right, sir?" she asked, her accent softening the edges of her words. Her voice was louder than necessary, as though she wanted someone in the dining room to hear. "Yes," I managed, just catching my breath. Her eyes flicked briefly to my pocket, the pocket where I had slipped my phone. Then she turned, disappearing into the kitchen without another word. But that look stayed with me. It wasn't coincidence. It wasn't imagination. Rosa knew something. Back at the table, Marcus leaned forward, elbows on the polished mahogany. "Everything okay, Dad?" "You're worrying us." "I'm fine," I said, taking my seat again, forced to smile. "Just these rich meals. Takes some getting used to." Amanda laughed lightly, refilling her own glass. "We'll fix that. You'll be here so often you'll forget what takeout tastes like." Marcus raised his glass. "To family, to second chances." Amanda clinked her glass against his, then turned hers toward me. I lifted mine slowly, the weight of it heavier than it should have been. "To family," I echoed, though the word tasted strange in my mouth. For a while I let their voices blur, answering when needed, nodding when polite. But my mind was elsewhere. On the message, on Rosa's eyes, on the way Amanda's smile never quite reached her eyes. On the way, Marcus's fingers drummed against the table in that old nervous habit he'd had since he was a boy. I studied the room more carefully now. The oil paintings on the walls, all expensive but impersonal, chosen by a decorator rather than someone who loved art. The china, flawless and gleaming, looked like it had never been used before tonight. Even the flowers in the centerpiece, white roses and lilies, were too perfect, too stiff, like props in a stage play. This house wasn't a home. It was a showpiece, and I was sitting in the middle of it trying to pretend everything was normal. Then my phone buzzed again. I felt it against my leg, a small vibration that sent ice through my veins. I didn't pull it out, not yet, not with their eyes on me. Instead, I reached for my water glass, taking a slow sip to cover the tremor in my hand. Marcus was talking about real estate markets, about timing and luck, about how Amanda had a gift for seeing opportunities before anyone else. His words flowed smooth and practiced, but there was something rehearsed about them, like lines memorized for an audition. Amanda nodded along, adding details about property values and investment portfolios. She spoke with confidence, her hands gesturing gracefully, but her eyes kept drifting back to me, watching, measuring. I smiled and nodded, playing my part. But inside, every instinct I'd honed over 77 years was screaming. Something was wrong. Something was very, very wrong. And whoever had sent that message knew it too. I excused myself again, my legs carrying me back into the hallway before I could think too hard about it. The noise of dinner conversation faded behind me, replaced by the heavy silence of expensive walls and marble floors. I leaned against the cool surface, trying to steady my breathing. My hand went to my chest, feeling Dorothy's pocket watch through the vest. Its steady tick was the only thing keeping me grounded. The hallway blurred for a moment, and suddenly I wasn't standing in this mansion anymore. I was back in our small kitchen in Queens, the one with the yellow wallpaper Dorothy had insisted on. Marcus was 16, walking through the door at midnight, his clothes reeking of cigarette smoke he swore wasn't his. "Where were you?" I had asked, my voice tight with worry and anger. "Just hanging with friends, Dad." His eyes couldn't meet mine, darting to the floor, to the wall, anywhere but my face. "You wouldn't understand." Dorothy had touched my shoulder that night, her hand warm and steady. "He's just a boy, James. He'll grow out of it. Don't be so hard on him." But even then, I'd seen something in Marcus's eyes that troubled me. Not just teenage rebellion, something deeper. A restless hunger. A need for shortcuts, for fast money, for applause that didn't have to be earned. He wanted what I had built, but without the years of sweat and scraped knuckles and humble beginnings. The memory shifted. Marcus at 25 sitting across from me at the kitchen table, papers spread between us. "A business opportunity, Dad. I just need $20,000 to get started. My buddy has connections. We can triple it in 6 months." I'd said no. I'd seen too many schemes in my years running pawn shops, too many desperate people trading family heirlooms for empty promises. Marcus had left angry that night too, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. The investment had failed within 3 months. He never mentioned it again. Another memory. Marcus at 30 standing beside Amanda at their wedding. She'd been beautiful in white silk, her blonde hair perfect, her smile practiced. I'd watched them exchange vows and felt Dorothy squeeze my hand. "She'll be good for him, James. She's stable. She'll keep him grounded." I had wanted to believe it. Amanda came from money, from a world of country clubs and trust funds and connections. Maybe that stability would rub off on Marcus. Maybe she would help him find his way. Looking at Amanda tonight with her cold smile and calculating eyes, I realized how wrong we'd been. She hadn't grounded him. She'd enabled him. Or worse, she'd sharpened whatever reckless edge he already had. A sound pulled me back to the present. Footsteps soft and deliberate. Rosa appeared at the end of the hallway carrying a tray of fresh glasses. When she saw me, she slowed. Our eyes met, and for the second time tonight I saw that look. The one that said she knew something I didn't. The one that warned me without words. "Everything all right, sir?" Her voice was professional, careful, but her eyes told a different story. "Just catching my breath," I said quietly. Her gaze flicked down to my pocket where my phone sat like a stone. Then she glanced back toward the dining room where Marcus's laugh echoed, too loud, too forced. When she looked at me again, something in her expression shifted. It was subtle, barely there, but I'd spent decades reading people across pawnshop counters. I knew desperation when I saw it. I knew fear. "You should drink some water, sir," she said, her voice slightly louder now, as though performing for anyone who might be listening. "It's easy to get dehydrated with rich food." "Thank you," I managed. She nodded once, a small, precise movement, and continued down the hallway toward the kitchen. But as she passed, her hand brushed against the edge of my jacket so briefly it could have been accident. Except it wasn't. I felt the deliberate pressure, the warning. The kitchen door swung shut behind her, and I was alone again. My phone buzzed. I pulled it out with shaking hands. Another message. Same block number. "The drink is not safe. Watch carefully. Don't let them push papers tonight." My throat went dry. Papers. What papers? I glanced back toward the dining room where Marcus and Amanda sat waiting. "The drink is not safe." I thought about the wine Amanda had poured so carefully, the way she'd nudged my glass closer when I hadn't touched it. My stomach turned. This wasn't paranoia. This wasn't coincidence. Someone in this house was trying to warn me, and that someone had to be Rosa. I slipped the phone back into my pocket, my mind racing. Whoever sent these messages knew what was happening here. They knew about papers. They knew about drinks. They knew I was in danger. The question was, what kind of danger, and how much time did I have? I straightened my jacket, touched Dorothy's watch one more time for courage, and walked back toward the dining room. My son and his wife were waiting, and now I knew I had to watch them, not as family, but as strangers who might be planning something I couldn't yet see. The hallway seemed longer walking back. Each step felt heavier. By the time I reached the doorway, my heart was pounding, but my face was calm. Marcus looked up, smiling. "There you are, Dad." We were about to send a search party. I forced a chuckle and sat down. Just old age catching up with me. Amanda pushed my wine glass closer. "Here, this will help." I stared at the dark liquid, remembering the words on my phone. "The drink is not safe." "Maybe later," I said, moving the glass aside. "I want to savor it." For just a moment, Amanda's smile faltered. I turned the glass slowly in my hand, letting the chandelier light catch on the amber surface. At first glance, it looked like any fine bourbon, smooth glowing, almost celebratory. But when I tilted it just so, I saw something else. Faint particles swirling at the bottom like dust trapped in honey. I blinked hard. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe my eyes, tired and strained, were playing tricks. Still, the words from the text glared in my memory. The drink is not safe. Amanda leaned closer, her perfume pressing in, sweet and cloying. James, you haven't touched it. You always liked a good drink. Her smile was tender on the surface, but her eyes betrayed urgency, a need for me to comply. I'm pacing myself, I said lightly, setting the glass down. My fingers tingled as though even touching the rim left residue. Marcus forced a chuckle, but it came too quickly, too loud. Dad's always been disciplined. That's why he built his pawn shops from the ground up. Right, Dad. His eyes darted to Amanda, then back to me. Something in the way he said it felt rehearsed, like a line from a play they'd practiced together. Yes, I said, slowly, my voice steadier than I felt. Discipline and trust. Exactly, Marcus replied too quickly. Trust is everything. Which is why we wanted to talk to you tonight about the future. The word future landed like a hammer. I folded my hands on the table, Dorothy's pocket watch pressing cold against my vest. Go on. Amanda placed her hand delicately over mine. Her skin was cool, her nails perfectly manicured and painted a shade of red that suddenly looked predatory. You've worked so hard all your life, James. Don't you ever think about slowing down, about letting someone else carry the load? Succession planning. Marcus added his smile too wide. You know, making sure your legacy continues. What if something happened? What if you got sick? I pulled my hand back gently, keeping my expression calm. Inside, my chest burned. So this was it. The reunion, the pot roast, the polished mansion, all of it had been theater leading to this conversation. My legacy is doing just fine, I said, my tone neutral. Amanda's smile flickered like a light bulb losing power. Marcus pressed harder, leaning forward. Dad, we're not saying now, just soon. You've got, 5 pawn shops properties across Brooklyn and Harlem. That's a lot to manage at your age. At my age. The word stung more than he probably intended, or maybe exactly as much as he intended. What if something happened? Marcus continued. What if you got sick? Who would handle everything? You don't want strangers making decisions about what you built. Dorothy's voice rushed back to me from years ago, whispering on a hospital night when Marcus had wrecked her car and begged us to pay for damages without involving insurance. If we keep rescuing him, James, he'll never learn to stand on his own. I stared at my son now, the grown man in a tailored suit, speaking with the same pleading urgency he'd used as a teenager. Except now the stakes weren't a broken bumper. They were my life's work. Life is unpredictable, I admitted carefully. But some things must be earned, not handed over. The silence that followed was heavy, thick enough to choke on. Amanda reached for her glass, covering her disappointment with a sip of wine. Marcus tapped his fingers against the table, that old nervous habit surfacing through his polished exterior. Rosa entered just then, carrying another tray of glasses. She set them down with hands that trembled slightly, the clink louder than it should have been. For just a heartbeat, her eyes flicked to me, then to the bourbon glass untouched by my hand, then to the papers. I could now see clearly at Marcus's elbow. Then she looked away, retreating toward the kitchen like a shadow. I wanted to follow her to demand answers, but Marcus's voice reeled me back. You know, he said too casually, Amanda's been reading about power of attorney, just in case something unexpected happens. Families should be prepared. My blood ran cold. Prepared. Exactly, Amanda chimed in, her tone, honeyed and smooth. So no one else, outsiders, lawyers, strangers, ever interferes. It should all stay in the family. I forced a smile, though my stomach turned. Outsiders can be very loyal sometimes, I murmured, glancing toward the kitchen door where Rosa had vanished. Neither of them caught the edge in my tone. The conversation shifted to lighter topics, but my focus didn't waver. I studied the table more carefully now. The papers stacked neatly near Marcus's elbow, half concealed beneath a linen napkin. Not menus, not decoration, documents. I could see the corner of a notary seal peeking out, official and damning. Amanda leaned forward again, changing the subject with polished ease. Tell us about your shops, James. 5 locations. Yes? Which one's doing best? Her eyes sparkled, but not with curiosity. With calculation. She was cataloging, inventorying, appraising. They all do fine, I answered, vague and steady. Each one has something Dorothy left in it. Her touch, her advice. They're built on more than numbers. Marcus chuckled, but the sound was hollow like wind through an empty house. Sentiment's nice, Dad, but sentiment doesn't pay the bills. Business is about margins, expansion, growth. You taught me that. I looked at him, really looked. For the first time in years, I saw past the expensive suit and the mansion and the rehearsed confidence. I saw the shadow of a boy chasing shortcuts, hungry for applause, terrified of failure. Except now he wore a wedding ring and sat in a house bought with money I suspected he didn't actually have. You remember what I taught you, I said evenly, but did you ever learn it? His smile faltered. Amanda shifted uncomfortably, the room chilled with the weight of words unspoken. I glanced again at the bourbon. The sediment sparkled faintly under the chandelier like shards of broken trust. My heart thudded against my ribs. I needed to move. I needed to think. Excuse me again, I said, rising slowly. Restroom this time. Marcus laughed too quickly. Of course, Dad. Second door on the left. Amanda's eyes followed me as I stepped into the hallway once more. The air outside the dining room felt clearer, freer, like stepping out of a cage. I pulled out my phone, staring at the screen, waiting for another message that might explain everything. And then it came. 3 words that made my pulse quicken. Kitchen. 5 minutes alone. I clutched Dorothy's watch through my vest, whispering silently, I hear you, Dorothy. I hear you. I turned toward the kitchen, drawn by the certainty that Rosa held answers I desperately needed. Behind me I heard Amanda's voice, light and sweet, asking Marcus something I couldn't make out. Their laughter followed, artificial and thin. 5 minutes alone. That was all I needed. 5 minutes to understand what trap I'd walked into and how I was going to walk back out. The kitchen door swung open with a soft creak. Inside, the scent of roasted meat lingered in the air, mingling with the sweetness of caramelized sugar from dessert. Rosa stood at the sink, her hands submerged in soapy water, scrubbing a wine glass with methodical precision. When she heard me enter, her shoulders tensed, but she didn't turn around. I let the door close behind me, the sound deliberate enough to announce my presence, but soft enough not to alarm anyone in the dining room. Rosa, I said quietly. She set the glass down carefully, dried her hands on a towel, and finally looked at me. Her eyes, brown and weary, held a weight I recognized. The weight of knowing too much. The weight of carrying secrets that didn't belong to you but would destroy you if you spoke them aloud. Mr. Robinson, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Don't drink. Don't sign. The words hit me like a physical blow, even though part of me had already known. Hearing it aloud stripped away any hope I had clung to that maybe I was imagining things, that maybe grief and suspicion were making me paranoid. You sent the messages, I said. It wasn't a question. She nodded quickly, glancing at the door as though expecting it to burst open at any moment. They put something in your bourbon. Not safe. They plan papers tonight. Transfer everything. Her accent thickened with urgency, each word tumbling over the next. I clean. I hear. I see. They talk like I am not here, like I am furniture. Like I am nothing. But I am here. I hear everything. What did you hear? My voice came out rougher than I intended. Rosa wrung the towel in her hands, her knuckles white. 2 weeks ago I was cleaning the office upstairs. They left papers on the desk. I saw your name. Power of attorney. Transfer of assets. I don't understand all the legal words, but I understand enough. They want everything you own. I steadied myself against the counter, the cool marble grounding me. How the bourbon? She nodded, her eyes glistening. I heard them talking last night. Mrs. Amanda said the sedative would make you relaxed, make you sign without thinking. She said by tomorrow you would not remember. They would have control. All of it. The shops, the properties, everything. For a moment the room tilted. Hearing it aloud made it real in a way that texts and suspicions couldn't. This wasn't just paranoia. This was a planned attack. My own son. My own blood. Why are you helping me? I asked, my throat tight. You could lose your job. Worse. Rose's eyes met mine, and in them I saw something fierce and unbreakable. Because you looked at me like a person, Mr. Robinson. When you came in tonight, you said my name. You thanked me. They don't do that. They laugh. They say words when I clean words they think I don't understand. Spanish words, ugly words. They don't care about you. They care only for what you built. Her voice broke slightly. And if they take it, they will throw you away. like they treat me, like garbage. The weight of her words pressed against my chest. I had spent my life surrounded by people who measured worth in what you owned, what you traded, what you could offer. I knew honesty when I saw it, and I saw it in Rosa's trembling hands and fierce eyes. I pulled out Dorothy's pocket watch, the metal warm from my body heat. My wife used to say the best people are the ones who do right when no one's watching. That's what you've done tonight. Rosa swallowed hard, blinking back tears. Then let me help more. The word startled me. Help more. She nodded, her voice steadier now. I know where the papers are. I know what they plan. They left copies in the office upstairs. I can show you. My breath caught. Evidence. Proof. Something concrete I could use. Rosa, I said carefully, if they catch you. They already think I am invisible, she said, her chin lifting slightly. Maybe that is my protection. They do not see me, so they do not think I see them. For the first time that evening, I felt a flicker of hope stronger than fear. Then yes, I whispered, show me. But before either of us could move, footsteps echoed in the hallway. Rosa's eyes went wide. She grabbed a dish towel and thrust it into my hands. Dry, she hissed under her breath, turning back to the sink and picking up another glass. I took the towel just as the kitchen door swung open. Amanda stood in the doorway, her silk dress catching the overhead light. Her smile was perfectly in place, but her eyes were cold, calculating. Everything all right? She asked, her voice light and sweet, like honey laced with poison. Rosa didn't look up, her hands busy with the dishes. Yes, Mrs. Amanda, just showing Mr. Robinson where we keep the dessert plates. I forced my expression to remain neutral, even friendly. Rosa was just telling me about the dessert. It sounds wonderful. Amanda's gaze moved between us, lingering a second too long on Rosa's back, then on my face. Well, don't keep us waiting too long, James. Marcus is eager to continue our conversation. Of course, I said, handing the towel back to Rosa. Our fingers brushed, and I felt her press something small and hard into my palm. I closed my fist around it without looking. Thank you, Rosa. She nodded once, her eyes never leaving the dishes. Amanda linked her arm through mine, her grip firmer than necessary. Come, dessert is almost ready. She guided me back toward the dining room, her perfume overwhelming in the narrow hallway. I slipped whatever Rosa had given me into my pocket, my heart pounding. Once we were out of earshot, I risked a glance. A folded piece of paper, small and tightly creased. Back at the table, the atmosphere had shifted. Marcus had moved the papers closer to my plate, no longer hidden beneath the napkin. They sat there openly now, a stack of legal documents with my name visible on the top page. A pen rested beside them, expensive and gleaming, waiting. Marcus smiled as I sat down. Dad, I wanted to show you something. Just a draft. Nothing binding. But it would give us peace of mind, you know, knowing everything's in order. I glanced at the papers, my stomach churning. Later I said quietly, dessert first. For just an instant, Amanda's smile froze. Her eyes flashed cold and sharp as broken glass. But she recovered quickly, laughing softly. Of course. Family time first. Business can wait. Marcus's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. His fingers resumed their drumming against the table, that nervous tell he'd never managed to hide. Rosa appeared with dessert, delicate plates of creme brulee, the tops caramelized to perfection. She placed mine before me carefully, her movements precise. When her hand brushed the table, I saw it again. That deliberate pause, that warning in her eyes. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I didn't need to look to know what it said, but I waited until Marcus and Amanda were distracted by their desserts before pulling it out under the table. The message was clear and urgent. Do not sign anything. Watch their hands. Watch the papers. I slipped the phone back into my pocket and picked up my spoon. The caramel cracked beneath the pressure, the sound echoing louder than it should have in the tense silence. Across from me, Marcus and Amanda exchanged a glance. A silent conversation passed between them, one I couldn't read but felt in my bones. The trap was closing, but thanks to Rosa, I could see the bars. I excused myself once more, citing the need for water. Marcus frowned but said nothing. Amanda's eyes tracked me like a hawk watching prey, but her smile remained frozen in place. I made my way back to the kitchen, each step deliberate, my heart hammering against my ribs. Rosa was waiting. She didn't look up when I entered, but her hands moved faster, scrubbing a plate that was already clean. The water ran loud enough to cover our whispers. Mr. Robinson, she said without turning. 5 minutes. That is all we have. I moved beside her, pretending to reach for a glass from the cabinet. What do you need me to do? She dried her hands quickly and pulled a dish towel from the counter. Folded inside was a small flash drive no bigger than my thumb. "Take this," she murmured, pressing it into my palm beneath the fabric. I copied what they printed this week: contracts, letters, their emails, enough to show intent. The towel nearly slipped from my hand. "Rosa, how did you manage this?" "They leave computers open," she said softly, her voice carrying both pride and sorrow. "Phones unlocked. They think I am nothing, so I became invisible. And invisible people can see everything." I felt a weight settle in my chest, not of fear, but of gratitude. "You've done more than I could ever ask. You must finish it," she said firmly, her eyes meeting mine with fierce determination. "The real papers are upstairs, office second floor end of the hall. You need photographs. You need proof they prepared this before tonight." That shows planning. That shows crime. I tucked the flash drive into my vest pocket next to Dorothy's watch. 2 anchors now. One of love, one of survival. "Can you show me?" She glanced at the door, listening. "They are eating dessert. Slow, but we must be fast." We moved through the kitchen's back entrance, Rosa leading me up a servant's staircase I hadn't known existed. The narrow passage was dim-lit only by small wall sconces. Our footsteps were muffled by worn carpet. At the top, she pushed open a door that led into the main upstairs hallway. "This way," she whispered. The hallway was wide and lined with expensive artwork, the kind chosen by decorators rather than collectors. We passed closed bedroom doors until Rosa stopped at the last one. She turned the handle slowly. It wasn't locked. Inside, the office smelled of leather and ink. A mahogany desk dominated the room, its surface neat and organized. On it lay a manila folder thick with documents. Rosa pointed. "There." I stepped forward, my hands trembling as I opened the folder. The first page made my breath catch. Power of attorney. My name printed in bold, formal letters. James Edward Robinson. Below it listed as the transferee, Marcus Robinson. I flipped through the pages, each one worse than the last. Asset transfers detailing my 5 pawn shops, their addresses, their estimated values. Bank account numbers I recognized as my own. The deed to my house in Queens, the house Dorothy and I had bought 40 years ago. Every piece of my life reduced to lines on paper, waiting for a signature drugged out of me. My hands shook as I pulled out my phone. I photographed every page, the flash-off hands as steady as I could manage. Each click of the camera felt like a small act of defiance. There were emails too printed out and paperclipped together. I skimmed them quickly. Amanda to Marcus dated 3 weeks ago. James is stubborn but predictable. The bourbon will work. He trusts family. Another from Marcus to Amanda. Once he signs, we cite early dementia. Dr. Peterson will confirm for the right price. I photographed those too, rage burning cold in my chest. They had planned this. Not a desperate act, but a calculated campaign to steal everything I had built. Rosa stood by the door listening. "Hurry," she whispered urgently. I was on the last page when footsteps echoed in the hallway. Rosa's eyes went wide. She motioned frantically toward a closet. I shoved the documents back into the folder, trying to make them look undisturbed, and dove into the closet just as the office door opened. Through the slats, I saw Marcus enter. He looked around the room, his expression suspicious. His eyes landed on the desk on the folder. He moved closer, checking to see if anything was disturbed. Rosa, still standing by the door, cleared her throat softly. "Mr. Marcus, I was just checking if you needed fresh towels in here." Marcus spun toward her. "What are you doing in my office?" Her voice didn't waver. "Mrs. Amanda asked me to check all the rooms upstairs. Make sure everything is ready in case your father stays the night." He studied her for a long moment, his jaw tight. "My father won't be staying the night." "Of course, sir." Rosa bowed her head slightly. "I will go now." She left, pulling the door closed behind her. Marcus stood there a moment longer, staring at the desk. Then he muttered something under his breath and followed her out. I waited, counting to 30 in the darkness of the closet before emerging. My legs were stiff, my heart still racing. I slipped out of the office and made my way back toward the main staircase, trying to look casual as though I'd simply been exploring. I was halfway down when Marcus appeared at the top of the stairs. "Dad." His voice was sharp. "What are you doing up here?" I turned, forcing my face into an expression of mild curiosity, admiring the house. "Amanda's done well with the decorating." His eyes narrowed. You were upstairs. Just looking around, I said evenly. Beautiful home you've built. You should be proud. His gaze shifted past me toward the office door, then back to my face. Something flickered there. Suspicion. Fear. But he covered it quickly with a tight smile. We'll come back down. We still have things to discuss. Of course, I said, descending the stairs slowly, deliberately, as though I had all the time in the world. Back in the dining room, Amanda was pouring coffee. She looked up when we entered, her eyes moving between Marcus and me, reading the tension. Everything all right? She asked sweetly. Fine, Marcus said, though his voice carried an edge. Dad was just exploring. I sat back down in my chair, feeling the weight of the flash drive and my phone in my pocket. The evidence was there. Solid. Undeniable. My phone buzzed softly. I glanced at the screen under the table. Save evidence. Delay. Police already alerted. Relief washed through me like cool water. I wasn't alone in this. Someone somehow had called for help. All I had to do now was survive until they arrived. Marcus pushed the papers closer to my plate. The pen sat beside them, gleaming under the chandelier light. Dad, he said, his smile strained. Let's talk about the future. I met his eyes, steady and calm. Later, I said quietly, I'm still enjoying dessert. For the first time that night, I saw real anger flash across his face before the mask slipped back into place. The tension at that table had become unbearable. Every second felt like balancing on a knife's edge. I knew I couldn't stay much longer without them forcing the issue. I checked my watch, Dorothy's watch, and made my decision. I'm not feeling well, I said, pushing back from the table. My voice carried just enough tremor to sound genuine. I think I need to head home. Marcus's face darkened. Dad, we haven't finished talking. We can talk another time, I said, firmly standing. My legs were steadier than I expected. Tonight has been wonderful, but I'm tired. Amanda rose quickly, her smile tight. At least let us call you a car. I've already ordered one, I lied, pulling out my phone. Should be here in 5 minutes. Marcus stood too, his jaw working. This is important, Dad, and I'll think about everything you said, I replied, meeting his eyes. But not tonight. I moved toward the foyer before either of them could protest further. Rosa appeared from the kitchen, my coat already in her hands. Our eyes met briefly, and I saw relief there. Thank you for a lovely evening, I said loud enough for Marcus and Amanda to hear. As the car pulled up outside, Marcus followed me to the door. Call me tomorrow, he said. We need to finish this conversation. I will, I said, though we both knew it was a lie. The ride back to Queens felt like crossing into another world. The mansion's lights faded behind me, and with each mile I could breathe a little easier, but the flash drive in my pocket felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Back home, my small row house had never looked so good. I locked the door behind me, turned on every light, and sat at my kitchen table with shaking hands. It was almost 11, but I didn't care. I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I'd known for 40 years. Mr. Thompson picked up on the third ring, his voice groggy. This better be good, James. I need you, I said simply. There are papers, fraud, attempted coercion, and I have proof. There was a pause, then his voice sharpened, all sleep gone. Tell me everything. I did. Slowly, carefully, each detail laid out like evidence on a workbench. He listened, his breathing steady, asking questions when needed. Finally, he spoke. I'll contact law enforcement first thing in the morning, but James, you need to stay safe until they can act. I'm not going back there, I said. Good. And don't sign anything. Don't even talk to Marcus until we have protection in place. After we hung up, I sat in the silence of my kitchen, Dorothy's watch ticking steadily. I felt the weight of the flash drive in my pocket, the photos on my phone. For the first time all evening, I felt like I had some control back. But I didn't sleep. I couldn't. The next morning, my phone rang at 8. Marcus. I let it ring twice before answering. Dad. His voice came fast, too bright. I hope you got home okay last night. We were worried. I'm fine, I said, my voice flat. Listen about those papers. Maybe we pushed too hard. Why don't you come back this weekend? We can talk more casually. Where did you get the money for that mansion? Marcus' silence. Then, what I asked you last night. Real estate, you said. But I've been in business long enough to know when someone's lying. So I'm asking again. Where did the money come from? His breathing changed faster now. Dad, that's not your concern. When you're trying to steal my businesses, it becomes my concern. So tell me, where did you get the money? Something broke in his voice. It was deals okay. High-stakes investments. I just need more time to make them pay off. Time for what I pressed. To pay back who? For the loan, he said, his voice cracking. For the people who he stopped abruptly. You owe money, I said flatly. A lot of it. And you thought the solution was to drug your father and steal what he built. The line went quiet for a long moment. Then Marcus's voice came back desperate and raw. These people. Dad, if I don't pay them, He didn't finish. Then you should have thought about that before you tried to poison me, I said coldly. I ended the call. 10 minutes later, my phone rang again. Unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Mr. Robinson. A man's voice low and smooth. You don't know me, but your son owes us money. A lot of it. And if he can't pay, we'll collect another way. My grip on the phone tightened, but I kept my voice even. Then you should know the police are already involved. If anything happens to me, they'll know exactly where to look. A pause, then a chuckle, humorless and cold. Smart man. But police don't always solve problems fast enough. The line went dead. I set the phone down slowly, my jaw clenched. This wasn't just about Marcus's greed anymore. It was bigger, darker. He'd gotten involved with people who didn't ask twice, and now he was drowning, trying to pull me under with him. I called Mr. Thompson back immediately. We need to move faster, I said. This isn't just fraud. There are dangerous people involved. I'm making calls now, he said. Stay inside. Don't answer the door for anyone you don't know. I spent the rest of the morning pacing my small house, Dorothy's photo watching me from the mantel. I thought about Marcus as a boy, about all the times I'd bailed him out of small troubles, hoping he'd learn. He'd learned all right. He'd learned that consequences were optional if you were clever enough. But not this time. This time, the consequences were coming. That afternoon, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open. The flash drive Rosa had given me felt heavy in my hand before I plugged it in. The files loaded slowly, folders appearing one by one on the screen. Contracts, emails, text message screenshots, everything organized, dated, labeled. I started with the emails. The first one made my stomach turn. From Amanda to Marcus, dated 3 weeks ago. Subject line, the plan. James will cave once he's relaxed. He always has. The bourbon will do the work. Make sure the dosage is right, not too much, that he passes out, just enough that he's compliant. 2 milligrams in the drink. He'll sign without thinking twice. I had to stop reading and breathe. My own son's wife writing about drugging me like I was a problem to be solved rather than a human being. The next email was Marcus's response. Agreed. Once he signs, we cite early onset dementia. Dr. Peterson will confirm for $15,000. We'll have full control within a week. The old man won't even know what hit him. The old man. That's what I had become to him. Not dad, not father. Just an obstacle between him and my money. I kept reading each document worse than the last. A draft contract with sedative dosage notes in the margins. Text threads between Marcus and Amanda discussing my routines when I was most likely to be tired, most likely to let my guard down. There was even a timeline. Dinner at 7, bourbon by 8, papers signed by 9, car service home by 10, confused and compliant. But the worst was a message from just 2 days ago, Amanda to Marcus. Once he signs, we give it 3 months, then move him into memory care, sell the Queen's house, liquidate the shops. We'll be clear of the debt by Christmas. Memory care. They were planning to lock me away, strip me of everything, and tell the world I'd lost my mind. My hands shook as I copied everything to my hard drive, then printed the most damning pages. The hum of the printer sounded like an engine revving before a race, steady and inevitable. By the time I finished, I had a folder thick with evidence. I locked it in my briefcase and sat back staring at Dorothy's photo on the wall. They thought they knew me. They thought wrong. The next morning I made a decision. I called Marcus. We need to talk, I said, face to face. He hesitated. Dad, if this is about yesterday, I can explain everything. I'm sure you can. Meet me at the Harlem shop. 10 o'clock. Don't be late. When Marcus arrived, he looked worse than I'd ever seen him. His expensive suit was wrinkled, his hair uncombed, his eyes bloodshot. The confident facade from dinner was gone, replaced by something desperate and dangerous. He walked into my office, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Dad, listen. About the papers. Maybe we moved too fast." "Sit down," I said. My voice was sharp, leaving no room for argument. He sat. I opened my briefcase, slowly pulling out the stack of papers. His eyes widened as he recognized them. "Where did you get those?" His voice cracked. "From your desk," I said. "From your own house. Don't insult me by pretending you don't know what these are." His face went pale. "Dad, I can explain." "You can't," I cut in. "What you can do is listen, because every word you say from this point on will be used against you." I spread the papers across the desk. The emails, the contracts, the dosage notes, the timeline, everything. His lips trembled. He tried to speak, couldn't find words. "You planned to drug me," I said quietly. "You planned to steal everything I built. You planned to lock me away and tell people I'd lost my mind. Your own father. They'll kill me," he suddenly shouted, slamming his fist on the desk. "Do you understand? Those people I owe, they'll kill me if I don't pay them. You're not saving yourself by doing this. You're signing my death warrant." The words echoed in the small office. He realized too late what he had admitted. I leaned back in my chair, calm as stone. "Then maybe you should have thought about that before you tried to poison me." His mouth opened closed. No words came. "This conversation is over," I said quietly, gathering the papers and sliding them back into the briefcase. "My lawyer has copies. The district attorney will have them by tomorrow morning. Dad, please," his voice broke. "Get out." He stood slowly, shoulders hunched, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. As he reached the door, he turned back one last time. "I'm still your son." "You stopped being my son the moment you put sedatives in my bourbon," I said. The door closed behind him with a soft click. I sat alone in my office, listening to the tick of Dorothy's watch in my pocket. Tomorrow the real battle would begin. The Brooklyn courthouse smelled of old wood and stale coffee. I pushed through the heavy doors, my briefcase clutched tight, Dorothy's pocket watch tucked close to my chest. Reporters crowded the steps outside, shouting questions, their cameras flashing like lightning. I ignored them all and walked straight ahead. Inside, the hush was heavier. Heads turned as I made my way down the aisle toward the front. Some saw an old man in a worn suit. Others saw something different. They'd soon understand. Marcus sat at the defendant's table, his face pale, his tie crooked. Amanda was beside him, perfectly composed in a navy dress, her blonde hair pulled back, her expression unreadable. When our eyes met, hers flickered, just for a second. Fear. The bailiff called the court to order. The judge, a stern woman with silver hair and sharp eyes, took her seat. The room fell silent. The district attorney rose first, a tall black woman named Ms. Patterson with a reputation for being thorough and relentless. "Your Honor, the state charges Marcus Robinson with attempted fraud, forgery, and conspiracy to defraud his father of property and assets totaling over $2 million. Today we will show not just intent, but detailed planning and execution." The words rang through the chamber. Marcus shrank in his seat. His lawyer, an expensive-looking white man in a gray suit, scribbled notes furiously. Ms. Patterson began laying out the timeline, the documents Rosa had copied, the emails between Marcus and Amanda discussing sedatives and dosages, the forged power of attorney papers with the notary seal. Each piece of evidence flashed on the projector screen, undeniable and damning. Marcus's lawyer objected at every turn, but the judge's gavel cut him down each time. Then came the moment I'd been both dreading and hoping for. The state calls Rosa Hernandez. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Marcus spun in his chair, his eyes wide with shock and betrayal. Amanda's face went rigid, her jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscles working. Rosa stepped forward from the back of the room. She wore a simple black dress, her hair pulled back, her hands trembling slightly as she clutched her purse. But when she raised her hand to swear in, her voice was steady and clear. "I do." Ms. Patterson approached gently. "Ms. Hernandez, can you tell the court your relationship to the defendant? I worked as housekeeper for Mr. and Mrs. Robinson for 2 years. And during that time, did you overhear conversations regarding the defendant's father?" "James Robinson?" Rosa nodded. "Yes, many times." "Can you describe what you heard?" Rosa took a breath, then spoke clearly. "I heard them planning to drug Mr. Robinson. Mrs. Amanda, she bought sedatives. She showed me the bottle, once told me to put it in the locked cabinet. She said it was for Mr. Robinson's visit. To make him relaxed, she said. To make him sign papers. The courtroom erupted in whispers. The judge banged her gavel. Order. Marcus's lawyer shot to his feet. Objection. Hearsay. The judge looked at him coolly. Overruled. The witness is describing what she directly observed and heard. Continue, Ms. Patterson. Ms. Patterson nodded. What else did you observe? Ms. Hernandez-Rosa's voice grew stronger. I saw the papers on Mr. Marcus's desk. Power of attorney, transfer of properties. I saw emails on the computer screen when I was cleaning. They talked about putting Mr. Robinson in memory care after he signed. They talked about selling everything. Did you report this to anyone? I was afraid, Rosa said quietly. But when Mr. Robinson came for dinner, I could not stay silent. I sent him messages. I warned him. I gave him evidence. Marcus's lawyer stood again. Ms. Hernandez, isn't it true you were dismissed from your position? I quit, Rosa said firmly. Because you were disgruntled. Rosa lifted her chin, her eyes blazing. I quit because I would not watch them destroy a man who never deserved it. Mr. Robinson treated me with respect. He said my name. He thanked me. They treated me like furniture, like I was nothing. But I am not nothing. Her eyes found mine across the courtroom. For the first time in 2 years of working for Marcus, someone had seen her, really seen her, not as hired help, but as a person with dignity and worth. No further questions, Ms. Patterson said softly. The courtroom was silent as Rosa stepped down, but before she could return to her seat, something unexpected happened. Amanda stood up. Her lawyer grabbed her arm, whispering frantically, shaking his head, but she pulled away, her face set. Your Honor, she said, her voice cutting through the murmurs. I wish to make a statement. The judge raised an eyebrow. Mrs. Robinson, you should consult with your attorney, I have, Amanda said coolly, and I've decided to cooperate with the state. The room exploded. Marcus turned to her, his face a mask of shock and rage. What are you doing? Amanda ignored him. I have emails, bank records, and correspondence showing that Marcus orchestrated this entire scheme. I was pressured. I was misled. I have evidence to prove it. You're lying, Marcus roared, slamming his fist on the table. The judge's gavel cracked like thunder. Mr. Robinson, sit down or you will be removed. Marcus slumped back, breathing hard, his eyes wild. Amanda kept her gaze on the judge. I have proof of his gambling debts, his loans from dangerous people, his desperation. I'm willing to surrender everything in exchange for leniency. The betrayal was complete. Marcus's own wife had just thrown him to the wolves to save herself. Ms. Patterson approached Amanda. You have documentation. Amanda nodded. Bank transfers. Wire instructions to loan sharks. Recorded voicemails where Marcus begs for more time. Everything. The DA accepted a folder from Amanda's lawyer. The judge called for a recess to review the new evidence. When court resumed an hour later, the case had shifted entirely. The DA presented Amanda's evidence. Bank transfers from accounts under Marcus's name showing hundreds of thousands borrowed at predatory rates. Wire instructions to shadowy lenders with addresses in cash-only businesses. Even a voicemail played for the entire courtroom where Marcus's voice, desperate and broken, begged someone named Dimitri for just one more week. Please, you have to understand. My father has the money. I just need to get him to sign. One more week. That's all I'm asking. Marcus's defense was in shambles. He sputtered, shouted about loyalty, about betrayal, about how he'd been set up. But every outburst only made him look smaller, more desperate, more guilty. Finally, Ms. Patterson turned to me. Mr. Robinson, can you tell the court why you're here today? I stood slowly, feeling every one of my 77 years, but also feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. Power. I'm here, I said, my voice steady, because my son thought I was weak. He thought he could erase me, drug me, steal from me. But a man doesn't measure his strength in how loud he shouts or how much he takes. He measures it in what he refuses to lose. My wife's memory, my life's work, my dignity. That's why I'm here. The silence that followed was absolute. The judge looked at her notes, then at Marcus, then at me. The jury will deliberate. They filed out. The wait was only an hour, but it felt like days. When they returned, the foreman stood. On the charges of fraud, forgery, and conspiracy to defraud, we find the defendant, Marcus Robinson, guilty on all counts. The word guilty hung in the air like a bell tolling. Marcus's face collapsed. He shook his head violently, looking at me as if I might still save him. Dad, please, you can't let them do this. I'm your son. I met his eyes, calm and unflinching. You stopped being my son the moment you tried to poison me." His scream echoed as the bailiff pulled him away, the handcuffs clicking into place. Amanda sat stone-faced, already speaking quietly, with prosecutors carving out her escape. The judge banged the gavel one final time. "Court is adjourned." As the room emptied, I sat for a moment longer, letting the silence settle around me like dust after a storm. The weight I'd been carrying for weeks, maybe longer, began to lift. Not completely, not yet, but enough that I could breathe without feeling like my chest was being crushed. The satchel beside me was lighter now. The evidence had done its work. Justice had spoken. I reached into my vest pocket and pulled out Dorothy's watch. The brass was warm from being pressed against my heart all day. I opened it, watching the second hand make its steady circuit. Tick, tick, tick. The same rhythm it had kept for 50 years, through weddings and births, through Dorothy's last breath, through tonight. She would have been proud, I thought, not of what had happened to Marcus, but of the fact that I'd stood my ground, that I'd refused to be erased. "Mr. Robinson." A soft voice pulled me from my thoughts. I looked up. Rosa stood at the end of the pew, her purse clutched in both hands. She looked smaller, somehow vulnerable in a way she hadn't when she was testifying. I stood slowly, my joints protesting. "Rosa." She stepped closer. "I wanted to thank you," she said quietly, "for letting me tell the truth, for seeing me." I shook my head. "I should be thanking you. You saved my life." Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't let them fall. "No one has ever stood up for me like that. In court. In front of all those people. When you said I was honest when you defended me," she stopped, unable to continue. "You are honest," I said, "and brave. Braver than most people I've known." She reached out and squeezed my hand once quickly, then let go. "What will you do now? Live," I said simply, "and make sure you're taken care of. Do you have a place to go?" She nodded. "My sister in the Bronx. I will stay with her." "Good," I said. "When things settle, come see me. I could use someone honest at one of my shops." Her face lit up, hope breaking through the exhaustion. "Really, really." She hugged me then, briefly but fiercely, then hurried away before the emotion could overwhelm her. I gathered my things and walked toward the exit. Mr. Thompson met me in the hallway, his expression a mixture of relief and concern. "You did it, James." "We did it," I corrected. "How are you feeling?" I considered the question. Tired, sad, but free. He nodded, understanding. "Go home. Rest. I'll handle the paperwork." Outside, the reporters swarmed like bees. Microphones thrust toward my face, cameras, clicking voices overlapping in a cacophony of noise. "Mr. Robinson, how do you feel about your son's conviction? Do you regret turning him in? Will you visit him in prison?" I kept walking, my eyes straight ahead, saying nothing. Some truths didn't need repeating. They simply stood. The crowd parted reluctantly, and I made it to the street where a car was waiting. As I slid into the back seat, I caught a glimpse of the courthouse behind me, its stone columns solid and unmovable. Justice had been served inside those walls. Not the kind that felt good, but the kind that was necessary. The driver pulled away from the curb, and the city blurred past. Queens had never looked so welcoming. The familiar streets, the bodega on the corner, the row houses with their small front yards and chain-link fences. This was home, not a mansion in Westchester, not some fantasy built on debt and lies, just home. When I walked through my front door, the house felt different. Not empty anymore, just quiet. There was a difference. I set my briefcase down, hung my coat on the rack, and walked to the mantel where Dorothy's photo smiled at me. I touched the frame gently. "It's over," I whispered. The clock on the wall ticked steadily, marking time, reminding me that life went on, that tomorrow would come, that I had survived. I thought about Marcus, probably sitting in a cell right now, facing the reality of what he'd done. Part of me, a small part buried deep, still ached for the boy he'd been. The one who'd helped me at the shops when he was young, who'd laughed at my jokes, who'd hugged me tight on the day Dorothy died. But that boy was gone. Maybe he'd been gone for years, and I'd just been too stubborn or too hopeful to see it. I made myself a cup of coffee, the ritual familiar and comforting. As I sat at my kitchen table, I pulled out my phone and looked at the messages Rosa had sent that night. "Stand up. Leave now. Don't tell your son." 3 simple sentences that had changed everything. I saved them. Not to relive the fear, but to remember the moment when a stranger someone society had taught to be invisible had chosen to be seen, had chosen to save me. My phone buzzed. A text from Mr. Thompson. The DA wants to meet tomorrow. Restitution discussion. Also, Rosa's testimony is getting media attention. She's being called a hero. I smiled. Good. She deserves it. I set the phone down and looked around my small kitchen. The chipped tile, the old refrigerator that hummed too loud, the table where Dorothy and I had shared thousands of meals. This was worth fighting for. Not because it was grand or impressive, but because it was mine. Built with my own hands, my own sweat, my own choices. And no one, not even my own son, could take that away from me. The days that followed moved slowly like wading through deep water. The media frenzy lasted about a week before moving on to the next scandal. My name appeared in headlines I never wanted to see. Elderly father stops son's fraud scheme. Housekeeper's courage saves Brooklyn business owner. Son sentenced in attempted theft from aging father. I stopped reading after the third article. The facts were accurate, but they couldn't capture what it felt like to lose a son while he was still breathing. Neighbors I'd known for decades started nodding differently when they saw me, not with pity, but with something closer to respect. Mrs. Turner from 2 houses down stopped me on the sidewalk one morning as I was checking my mail. James, she said, touching my arm gently, I heard what happened. I just wanted to say you did right. Not many men could face their son like that. Thank you, I managed. Though, the words felt hollow. It took strength, she continued. Real strength. Dorothy would be proud. I nodded, not trusting my voice. That afternoon, Miguel showed up at my door. He was one of my first employees back when I only had one shop. Now he ran his own place in the Bronx, but we'd stayed close over the years. He handed me a folder without saying hello. Paperwork from the registry, he said. Your name's cleared on all the properties. No disputes left. Everything's back in your control. I took the folder, feeling its weight. Thank you for handling this. He shook his head. You taught me everything, James. This was the least I could do. He paused, then added, what Marcus did, man, that was cold. But you handled it right. You protected what you built. Sometimes protecting what you built means protecting it from your own blood, I said quietly. Miguel nodded, understanding in his eyes. If you need anything at all, you call me. Doesn't matter what time. After he left, I sat with the folder unopened on my lap for a long time. A week later, Rosa knocked on my door. She carried a small tin, the kind used for homemade cookies. Her eyes were brighter than I'd seen them at the trial. Mr. Robinson, she said shyly. I baked. I thought you might like some. I invited her in and we sat at my kitchen table with coffee. She looked around, taking in the modest space, the photos on the walls, the worn furniture that had seen decades of life. You loved her very much, she said, nodding toward Dorothy's photo on the mantel. Still do. She'd be proud of what you did, of how you stood up for me too. I met her eyes across the table. Dorothy used to say, the best people are the ones who do right when no one's watching. That's what you did, Rosa. You risked everything. She smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes. I got a job, she said, at a restaurant in the Bronx. The owner, he saw me on the news. He said he wants honest people working for him. That's wonderful. But my offer still stands. When you're ready, there's a place for you at any of my shops. She reached across and squeezed my hand. Thank you for seeing me, for making me visible. After she left, the house felt warmer somehow, less empty. The news about Marcus filtered through in bits and pieces. He was denied bail, considered a flight risk given his debts to dangerous people. Amanda had indeed cooperated fully with prosecutors, receiving a reduced sentence of probation and community service in exchange for her testimony. She'd disappeared from public view, presumably back to whatever life she could salvage from the wreckage. The loan sharks Marcus had borrowed from were never found, but the threats stopped. Maybe they'd decided I wasn't worth the trouble. Maybe they'd found other desperate people to prey on. I didn't think about them much. I had enough to process without adding fear to the mix. 3 weeks after the trial, I was sorting through mail when I found it. A letter, handwritten, postmarked from the correctional facility where Marcus was being held. My hands shook as I held it. For a long moment, I considered throwing it away unopened. But something, maybe curiosity, maybe the ghost of the father I used to be, made me sit down and carefully tear open the envelope. Inside was a single page, Marcus's handwriting smaller and shakier than I remembered. I unfolded it slowly and began to read. Dad, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I don't even know if I deserve another chance at being called your son. But sitting in this cell, stripped of everything, the suits, the mansion, the illusions I built around myself, I see now what I became, what I did to you, to Mom's memory, to myself. I told myself I was desperate, that the debts were crushing me, that Amanda and I had no other choice. But that was a lie. There's always a choice, and I chose wrong. I chose to see you as an obstacle instead of as my father. I chose to drug you, to steal from you, to plan your erasure as if you were nothing more than a problem to solve. You taught me about honest work, about building something brick by brick, deal by deal. But I wanted shortcuts. I wanted the mansion and the cars and the respect without earning any of it. And when it all started falling apart, instead of coming to you for help, for guidance, I tried to take what you'd spent a lifetime building. I remember when I was 7 working with you at the Brooklyn shop. You let me help organize the display cases, taught me how to assess value, how to treat every customer with dignity no matter what they were pawning. You said, son, people come here when they're desperate, never make them feel small. I made you feel small. I made you feel like nothing. If there's anything left of me worth saving, it's because of you. Because somewhere under all the greed and fear and stupidity, there's still that 7-year-old boy who wanted to make his father proud. I don't expect an answer to this letter. I don't expect forgiveness. I just needed you to know that I see it now. All of it. And I'm sorry. Your son, Marcus. I read the letter 3 times, each word sinking deeper. The handwriting wavered in places as though he'd been crying while writing it. Maybe he had. Maybe prison had finally broken through the armor of denial he'd been wearing for years. I folded the letter carefully, creasing it along the original lines. Then I walked to the bedroom and opened the drawer where Dorothy's Bible sat, the one she'd read every Sunday morning. I placed the letter between the pages she'd marked with pressed flowers, the ones from our garden that she'd saved over the years. Forgiveness, I realized, wasn't about Marcus. It was about me. It was about choosing not to carry the weight of his choices for the rest of my life. I could acknowledge what he'd done and still let go of the rage that had been eating at me. That didn't mean forgetting. It didn't mean reconciliation. It just meant I was choosing freedom over bitterness. The next Sunday, I drove to the cemetery where Dorothy rested. The morning was cool and clear, the kind of day she'd loved. I parked and walked slowly to her headstone, carrying fresh lilies. I brushed the stone clean, clearing away leaves and dirt. Then I laid the flowers at the base, arranging them the way she would have liked. I thought revenge would feel louder, I said softly, my voice carrying across the empty cemetery. But it feels like this. Quiet, steady, like breathing again after holding it too long. The wind rustled through the trees, gentle and reassuring. For a moment, just a moment, I felt her presence. Not as a ghost, but as a memory so strong it felt real. Her hand on my shoulder, her voice in my ear. You did right, James. Now let it go. I stayed until the sun touched the horizon, painting the sky in gold and amber. That evening, I went to my Harlem shop to catch up on paperwork. The place was closed, the security gates down, but I had my keys. Inside, the familiar smell of old leather and metal greeted me. This had been my life's work. These shops, these deals, these relationships built one transaction at a time. As I cleared my workbench, organizing receipts and inventory sheets, I noticed something tucked in the back corner. A toy car, small and battered, its paint-chipped wheels rusted from years of neglect. I picked it up carefully, turning it in my hands. Marcus had left it here when he was 7 after spending a Saturday helping me. He'd been so proud that day, organizing shelves, greeting customers, learning the business from the ground up. I remembered his face smudged with dust, grinning when someone complimented his work. I remembered teaching him how to test gold, how to spot real value beneath tarnish and age. I remembered him looking up at me like I knew everything, like I could fix anything. That boy was gone. Maybe he'd been dying slowly for years, suffocated by wants and shortcuts and the relentless pressure of trying to be something he wasn't. But he'd existed once. That was real. I held the toy car for a long time, feeling its weight, its history. Then I carried it to the shelf behind my desk and set it there gently. Some things you don't erase, I said quietly to the empty shop. You simply leave them where they belong. The car sat on the shelf, a reminder of what had been, what was lost, and what could never be recovered. but also a reminder that even in the wreckage of broken relationships, there were moments worth remembering. I locked up the shop and stepped out into the Brooklyn night. The street was alive with people, with music drifting from open windows, with the smell of cooking and the sound of laughter. I walked home slowly, Dorothy's watch ticking steadily in my pocket, keeping time with my heartbeat. Tomorrow would come, and the day after, and I would be here to meet them free and whole. The shop was quiet at this hour, long after closing. I sat at my desk in the back office, the same desk where I'd built this business from nothing. A cup of coffee steamed beside me, still hot, still strong. Dorothy's pocket watch lay open on the desk, its steady tick, the only sound besides my breathing. I looked at her photo, the one I kept in a simple frame beside my computer. She was smiling, that knowing smile she had when she was right about something but too kind to say "I told you so." "We did it," I whispered to her image. "We protected what we built." The words felt true but incomplete, because this hadn't just been about protecting businesses or bank accounts. It had been about protecting something deeper: dignity, self-determination, the right to own what you built with your own hands. In Black America, family loyalty runs deeper than blood. It's survival. It's legacy. It's all we had when systems failed us, when doors slammed shut, when we had to build our own tables because we weren't allowed at theirs. Family was supposed to be the one thing you could count on. But I'd learned something these past weeks. Loyalty without boundaries becomes bondage. Love without limits becomes a cage. I didn't betray Marcus by refusing to be drugged and robbed. I honored the values Dorothy and I had worked so hard to instill in him. Values our ancestors had died to pass down: dignity, integrity, the belief that what you earn, you keep. Sometimes protecting your legacy means protecting it from your own blood, and that's the hardest lesson any parent learns, especially a Black father who fought for every inch, who built something from nothing in a world that told him he couldn't. I thought about all those nights working late at the shops, missing dinners, missing bedtimes, building something I could pass down to Marcus. I'd imagined him taking over one day, expanding what I'd started, making it his own. But you can't force someone to value what they didn't have to fight for. "I didn't win by destroying them," I said softly, still looking at Dorothy's photo. "I won by refusing to be destroyed." Revenge doesn't have to be fire and fury. Sometimes the greatest revenge is silence, the silence of a man who walks forward free. I closed the watch carefully and slipped it back into my pocket. Then I stood, feeling my 77 years in my knees and back, but also feeling something else: strength. Not the kind that shouts or threatens, but the kind that endures. I turned off the lights in the office, checked the security system one last time, and stepped out into the shop floor. The display cases gleamed in the dim emergency lighting, filled with treasures people had pawned, stories I'd never fully know. Each item represented someone's desperation, someone's hope, someone's survival. I'd spent my life being the bridge between need and solution. I'd treated every person who walked through those doors with dignity, just like I'd taught Marcus when he was 7. He'd forgotten that lesson somewhere along the way, but I hadn't. I locked the front door, the deadbolt clicking into place with a satisfying sound. Outside, Brooklyn hummed with late-night energy. Street lights cast yellow pools on the sidewalk. Music drifted from an apartment above the bodega. Someone laughed in the distance. I stood there for a moment, keys in my hand, feeling their weight. These keys represented more than locks and doors. They represented ownership, control, the freedom to decide what happened next. I'd fought for that freedom. I'd defended it. And now I owned it completely. I walked down the street toward home, my shadow long under the streetlights. The night air was cool against my face. My footsteps echoed on the pavement, steady and sure. I was 77 years old. I'd buried a wife I loved. I'd lost a son I'd raised, but I was still here, still standing, still moving forward, silent, but unbroken, free. In Black America, family loyalty runs deeper than blood. It's survival, it's legacy, it's all we had when systems failed us. But loyalty without boundaries becomes bondage. James didn't betray his son by refusing to be drugged and robbed. He honored the values his ancestors died to pass down: dignity, self-determination, the right to own what you built with your own hands. Sometimes protecting your legacy means protecting it from your own blood. And the hardest lesson for any parent, especially a Black father who fought for every inch, is knowing when love requires letting go, even when letting go looks like a courtroom and a guilty verdict. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the playlist now showing on your screen.